Greetings everyone, welcome to Coffee Black, where you get your refill of everything Star Trek. I am your host, Captain G, and this video will be the first in a series I am calling Captain G's Ready Room, where I talk about anything and everything Star Trek related, and just give you my personal experience and my personal opinion of it. So for this very first video, I'm going to go ahead and tell you how I became a fan of Star Trek. So I had a very interesting upbringing despite being a kid of the mid-80s and early 90s. My parents were very protective about what my siblings and I watched on television, so they taped pretty much everything on VHS, including a bunch of shows from the 1960s that they grew up with. So I grew up with Get Smart, Gilligan's Island, Hogan's Heroes, and of course, Star Trek. My father in particular was a really big Star Trek fan, and because of that, he allowed us to watch the original series and also the original series spin-off films. That being said, as big of a fan of Star Trek as he was, he didn't like any of the spin-off series. He didn't like The Next Generation or Deep Space Nine. So because of that, I didn't even really know of its existence. I watched whatever my parents would allow us to watch. I do remember as a kid being about 5 or 6 years old and really enjoying Star Trek though. Especially the one episode, Journey to Babel. I think that was probably my favorite episode as a kid. The mystery, it was kind of like a murder mystery type of a situation. So I remember really enjoying that episode in particular. Fast forward to 2001, by this point I'm 15 years old. And I ended up losing my father due to complications with brain cancer. As a result, this caused me to be extremely introverted. I was already kind of shy anyway, but this took it to a whole new level for me. I basically spent majority of my time at home. I quit all my sports. I basically stopped doing most of my activities that were after school related and spent time with my mother, who was grieving at that point, and my sisters, who were just coming into their own, getting ready to be teenagers as well. So they were kind of off doing their own thing. And I basically spent all my time at home. I spent time with my mother. I spent time by myself watching TV and playing video games and such. And after my father had passed in May of that year, leading on into the summer, I spent a lot of time, a lot of late nights, video gaming and watching TV at night. And that's how I was introduced to Star Trek Voyager, as at the time on UPN they had reruns of old Voyager episodes. And from the very first episode that I saw, I was completely hooked. I wish I could remember what episode that was, but it was enough for me to be so interested I started taping episodes every single night, all through that summer. My experience is kind of interesting in the sense that I didn't get to see Voyager from the very beginning at that point. I saw it about halfway through the series, so 7 of 9 was already there. So some could say, arguably, I was already watching Voyager at its best, with some of its best characters being there. I don't know if I entirely agree with that, but that's what a lot of people would probably say. So at that point I ended up watching the remainder of the series all the way up into the finale, and then the television station just recycled all the episodes. So then I got to see Voyager's pilot for the first time, and continued taping episodes all the way up until I started having some redundant episodes. Star Trek Voyager, in many ways, was very instrumental for me, not just as a means for me to rediscover my love of Star Trek, but it also brought certain character traits that I feel like I probably was missing at that point in my life, with my father having passed, my mother being distant, and my own teenage sisters kind of doing their own things. So I look at characters like Neelix and Chakotay and Janeway, Tom and Harry, and all those characters had certain character traits that I kind of think I was missing at that point in my life. My father had passed, and Chakotay's gentle demeanor was very similar to that of my father's. He kind of felt like a father figure to me. And then Janeway, on the flip side of that, felt very motherly. It was commanding, but also it would fight like hell for her crew. And in many ways, those were traits I probably felt I was lacking at that point from my own mother, who had become so distressed by my father's passing that she just kind of kept to herself and didn't know how to cope. And then there's Tom and Harry. I didn't have any older siblings, but if I did, I'd probably want older brothers like Tom and Harry. So their influence was very special for me as well. And then of course Neelix. I know a lot of people don't necessarily like the character, but he would have been the cool, fun uncle to try to keep you optimistic, and I kind of feel like that's something I also feel I was missing in my life at that point as well. So after Voyager ended, I did watch Star Trek Enterprise when it aired on TV, but I didn't really catch all of it. There were a few episodes here and there throughout the seasons of 2 and 3 that I kind of just missed. But I did see the finale, so I did get to see how the series ended. And I have since rewatched it, so I did get to see the series in its entirety. But from that point on, I was interested in The Next Generation. I didn't see the series, but I did check out the movies. So I rented the movies, and Star Trek Nemesis was actually the first Star Trek film that I saw in theaters. I know not everybody likes that film. I enjoyed it for the most part, and seeing Janeway having a cameo in that film was super special, and I really enjoyed that as well. Around the time that I turned 19, I made a friend online. A friend who had similar interests, comic books, superheroes, science fiction. And it was through that friendship that I kind of realized I kind of stopped living life. You know, I became so introverted that I wasn't going out and doing a whole lot. I spent all my time playing video games, watching TV, and being online in message forums and stuff like that. And this is just before social media just started to build up. There was no Facebook. There was a MySpace by that point, I think. But yeah, social media was in its infancy at this point. But through this friendship, we ended up sharing our love of Star Trek. She had seen The Next Generation, that was her favorite series, but hadn't seen Voyager. I had seen Voyager, but hadn't seen The Next Generation. So it was really cool because back in the day, you know, we didn't have FaceTime calling. We didn't have like FaceTime calling or anything like that. We did have AOL Messenger. We did have Yahoo Messenger. So we both ended up watching both of those shows together, you know, just typing out starting 1, 2, 3, and we both watched the episodes together across the internet and just enjoy Star Trek together. And it was a really great friendship in the sense that it helped me come to terms with my father's death, come to terms with my life needing to move on. And so that friendship was very instrumental. And so was Star Trek The Next Generation and Voyager, for that matter. So fast forward to 2020. By that point, I had met my wife and we got married. She was a fan of Star Trek as well. And we knew that a new Picard series was coming out. We definitely wanted to check that out, but wanted to see everything that came before. So from that point on, you know, I was off work. I had a lot of time on my hands, so we ended up binging the original series, TNG. We saw Voyager. At this point, I realized I had never fully watched Deep Space Nine. I tried once before. I watched the pilot. The first half was action-packed and great. The second half, I fell asleep. And I didn't go back to the show after that because I was like, well, I fell asleep, so it must not have been that interesting, and I just never gave it another chance. So fortunately, because of COVID, I went ahead and rewatched Deep Space Nine, got to see it in its entirety, and I really enjoyed it, especially the last few seasons that it had. And by that point, I finally had gotten caught up with all of Star Trek, except one series. Up to this point, I've seen everything except the animated series. So what I'm thinking about doing is doing a reaction series for Star Trek the Animated Series. If you're interested in that, leave a comment and let me know. I've only seen a couple episodes of the animated series, and I know it's 60s animation, so it's probably just a little rough. But at the same time, that's still something on my personal checklist that I'd like to complete. So I can honestly say I've watched all the Star Trek you can possibly watch. And there you have it. That is my very long-winded breakdown of how I became a fan of Star Trek. More importantly, I'm curious how you all became fans of Star Trek. So leave a comment down in the comment section below. Tell me your personal story, how you became a fan of Star Trek. I think that would be incredibly interesting. And that's all we have today. Thank you for watching. I hope you all take care, and I'll see you in the next Ready Room video. Live long and prosper.